Happy solstice, everybody. The news today is good news for a change. It seems like, there's been a temporary reprieve in this drive towards war with Iran. And tensions in the Persian Gulf and the Straits of Hormuz have been escalating for the last week or so. Looked like building towards war. Donald Trump has apparently backed off from major retaliatory strikes for the downing of a American spy drone allegedly in Iranian airspace. So he said that the major retaliatory strikes that were planned were not proportionate to the downing of a drone, and so he's backed off from those. That is encouraging news. At this point, the only thing partially redeeming Donald Trump for me is that the gap between what he promises and what he delivers is as big for Israel as it is for America. So, he's their greatest ally in rhetoric, but, his performance or his delivery is kind of as lackluster for them as it is for us. And that's a good thing. I'm happy about that, and I hope you're happy about that too. Now, all of my adult life, these Neocon traitors have been beating the war drums, for this war with Iran. They've been trying to instigate this and drum up hostility and aggression for this war against Iran all of my adult life. And these neocon traitors are all either corrupt, profiteering warmongers, the Dick Cheneys, so to speak, or they are, aliens whose loyalties lie elsewhere than to America or the American people. The Wolfowitzes, the Crystals, those kind of people. And, the costs that these people have imposed on America are enormous. We've had the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've had interventions in Pakistan and Syria. And the cost that these have imposed, not just on America, but on the whole world and the Western world, have been enormous. There was a 2013 Harvard study that found the price tags for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the projected price tags, to be something like $4 to $6 trillion. There was a more recent 2016 study at Brown University which found that the conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Syria had cost $4.79 trillion to date and projected to cost almost $8 trillion when you factor in future obligations and interest payments and things like that. So enormous cost imposed by these corrupt, profiteering warmongers and these, alien agents, these alien fifth columnists who are exerting undue influence over America's foreign policy to benefit countries other than America, principally Israel and Saudi Arabia. Israel and Saudi Arabia are the beneficiaries of these wars that have cost so much blood and treasure already, that have destabilized the whole region, that have sent waves of refugees into Europe for the benefit of Israel and Saudi Arabia, who are Iran's principal rivals in the region. And that's where the animus for this war is coming from, the impetus for this war is coming from Israel and Saudi Arabia, from their loyalists and agents in the United States, and from the corrupt, profiteering warmongers among our own people. So that's the cost so far of the global war for Israel, or whatever you want to call it. And but if this escalates to Iran, the costs are going to be much greater again than that, even, because Iran has more than twice the population of Iraq. Iran has almost, it has 2.5 times the economy of Iraq. It has 3 times the labor force of Iraq, and presumably like the military manpower. Whereas the Ba'athist government of Saddam Hussein was drawn from a small Sunni minority within Iraq, the Persian majority, Shiite majority in Iran, is much larger. And correspondingly more powerful. And maybe more importantly, Iran has a demonstrated track record both in reality as well as in thought experiments of defying the expectations of their enemies. At the Millennium Challenge exercise in 2002, a Marine Corps general was given command of an Iran-inspired Middle Eastern opposing force, Red Force, and was able to score impressive early victories against the U.S. military by using unorthodox and asymmetrical tactics. And in 2006, Iran had a largely successful proxy war with Israel in Lebanon using Hezbollah, who they trained and supplied. Hezbollah snatched some Israeli border guards and captured them, took them back to Lebanon. Israel launched an invasion and large-scale strikes in Lebanon, and eventually had to give up and return home without actually recovering their border guards. So, Iran has a demonstrated track record of being able to deal with technologically more advanced adversaries. And Marine generals are smart. Marines are smart. They have a reputation, an undeserved reputation for, crudeness and simplicity. They may be the smartest branch of the American armed forces, but Iranians are smart too. And, they know what they're up against and how to play to their strengths and against our weaknesses, and not the reverse. So it's definitely going to be more costly than the Iraq War. It's not something that seems beneficial to get involved with. And yet this has been basically the open and explicit goal of the American foreign policy establishment for my entire adult life, is provoking this war for the benefit of Israel and Saudi Arabia. That will only cost America, that will only harm America. And so, it's been tremendously concerning to see the tensions rising and the situation escalating the last few days. And it's good to see a step back. And it's good to see all the reports in the Israeli media about how terrible it is that the U.S. isn't going to go to war with Iran just yet. And so, hopefully that gulf between what Trump promises to Israel and what Trump delivers will continue to widen. And, I've given up at this point on expecting much from him domestically, but as long as, he can continue to disappoint expectations abroad, that will make me at least somewhat happy. And by the way, let's just dispense with any notions of, the benefits of imposing democracy on Iran, because, while the Persian majority in Iran may be much larger than whatever minority was constituting the Ba'ath Party in Iraq, it's still a diverse enough country that democracy is a terrible system of government for that country. And, as in all of these countries, instituting democracy is just going to provide another arena for ethnic and sectarian conflict and nepotism and patronage and all this other kind of stuff that always happens in all of these countries whenever you introduce democracy. Democracy evolved in a very particular context, in a very particular type of outbred homogenous Western country, and it doesn't work in inbred or heterogeneous countries at all. Even less well than it works, in Western countries after it's had a few centuries to degenerate. And so, exporting democracy is not a valuable foreign policy. It's not. The British were able to construct an empire on the basis of exporting their legal and economic systems. And that was productive, largely, because, the English common law is an excellent legal system. Market economies are excellent economic systems, at least for certain purposes. And they were able to generate surpluses from the imposition of these over alternatives and share those surpluses with, between themselves and the people they colonized. Largely leaving them better off, while also making, a bit of money for their trouble. So that's a productive form of colonization. That's a profitable form of colonization. This is not. Imposing democracy, it's a destructive, chaos-inducing system for very diverse, ethnically and religiously divided countries. And as it's getting to be for our country, because it's making our countries like that. And so, this is not a productive norm to export, and neither are the other things that Western governments are, typically insistent on exporting. All the human rights nonsense, and the women's rights, and women's lib, and feminism, and gay rights, and now the gender insanity. These are not productive norms. These are parasitic and destructive norms. And there's no way to pay for their export or to make their export pay for itself, because it's trouble and it's expense and it's blood and treasure that we have to expend on exporting norms that won't generate anything of equivalent value in return. Like, it's just a way to speed up the consumption of our people and our wealth, while at the same time harming and damaging the people it's imposed upon. And I believe that's the entire point. I don't believe the people behind this sincerely think that democracy or human rights or feminism or gay rights or any of these things are intended to help out the people that they're imposed upon. I don't believe that. I think it is malicious. It's something that's motivated by malice and an intent to harm. Not only the recipients, but us, the people who are supposed to carry out that imposition. So, basically screw those objectives of imposing democracy and all of these other degenerate postmodern Western values layered on top of it on the rest of the world. That is a bullshit agenda, a bullshit program that I don't subscribe to, and I hope none of you subscribe to.